Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another Star Wars Lads review. Today we're talking about Tales of the Jedi, which just dropped yesterday with Andor Episode 8. So if you haven't checked out our Andor Episode 8 review, that is up on the channel, but we wanted to give it about a day to let that breathe before we talk about Tales of the Jedi right now. But before we do so, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to our channel. We're on the road to 1,000 subs. All of your subscription really matter. It'll help us continue to give you guys great content and improve our content here in the future if you subscribe. So please do that. And then comment below, let us know what you thought of Tales of the Jedi. This was a really interesting series, a unique thing, and hopefully they give us a little bit more from it. But we're going to dive into that right now. So, Tales of the Jedi is basically made up of two stories revolving around two different characters, each 3 episodes. So, we're going to talk about each of those stories, spoiler filled for those of you who have not seen the show. So, if you haven't seen the show, save this video, come back, watch it after you've seen the episodes. But we're going to start with Count Dooku's story. I think that one was a bit more interesting across his 3 episodes than Ahsoka's. We've gotten so much Ahsoka content that it's nice to flesh out another character who hasn't gotten much pre Attack of the Clones development outside of one audio drama. So let's talk about Count Dooku and the 3 different stages he is presented in his story. Sanak, what were your thoughts on the overall Count Dooku storyline across Tales of the Jedi?
I think it's basically the bleeding heart of the whole series so far. I think after watching the 3 episodes, I have a lot of hope for Filoni during some live action TV show breaks coming by and throwing another 3 episodes out whenever. Like, this is a good way for him to still be tied to the animated field. And I think for a lot of us, the feeling was he's become so successful, such a big writer, such now has his own Ahsoka live action show coming out. Will he still have that same enthusiasm, that same consistent quality that he had for Clone Wars and Rebels? And the answer is a pretty resounding yes if we just look at the Count Dooku episodes, because those are fantastic for me. I think a big thing I want to address right away is that, but it appears to be that Dooku Jedi Lost, which is pretty fundamental to the backstory of Count Dooku's character from the days as a youngling to his eventual demise. Like, all that stuff appears to be canon. There's an Age of Republic short where he's got white hair and he's wearing kind of more of his Attack of the Clones look versus what we see here in the Tales of the Jedi. But maybe he forgot to wear hair color one day or something like that. That's more like an artistic interpretation as opposed to plot and whatnot. So if you're a big Dooku Jedi Lost audiobook book fan, don't worry. It looks like everything can be waved away. It's not anything as dramatic as like Kanan's backstory being changed for the first episode of The Bad Batch. It was great. I think I really liked the progression. First episode was focused on Qui-Gon and the first like inklings of like serious struggles for Count Dooku. It already appears that he has. And that's probably the least interesting of the episodes for me. But it's fun because that episode we get to see Qui-Gon, a young Qui-Gon without the beard, and see a little bit more of like how he feels about his master, especially in reference to Master and Apprentice, where he's like, I haven't talked to him in years. There is that tension, even if they both trust each other, even if Dooku calls him, you're a wise Jedi compared to me. Like, Dooku's struggling with things well before even their apprenticeship appears to begin. The second episode was fun too. That one was Mace Windu and Qui-Gon focused. Mace Windu looks the same. He's just a bald guy. Like, he looks a little younger, I guess, in the face. We got some stuff at Raxus, so that's a nice little tie into like Bad Batch. And I like just how much more they're edging him into uh, more of the Count Dooku's unable to like stop himself from what he's doing. And I think that episode also really kind of highlighted some of the flaws that I see in Mace Windu, because at this point in time, he's a much younger man. He very strictly follows the Order's rules. But that eventually does become his demise. Like, right now, he's so young. Nothing's really going on in the galaxy that he can't handle. That from his point of view and from an outsider's point of view, maybe Dooku does come off as like the aggressor, as making some poor mistakes and lapses in judgment. But eventually, these same things that Mace abides by are his own downfall. So I thought that was pretty interesting to showcase. But it's really the third episode, the Sith Lord. That was great. We got to see Yaddle, voiced by Bryce Dallas Howard, and I thought she did a great job with the voice as well. Yeah, I think the third episode really highlighted the tragedy because it is so intertwined with episode one. We see Qui-Gon and Dooku meet. Yaddle is killed. Yaddle does show off a little bit of her Yoda-like force abilities, but that wasn't enough to keep her alive, it seems. So, yeah, it was a pretty sad but fun episode, and I think put together, it's a very nice, intimate portrait of a man who's like Anakin, who might be a little bit more dignified and regal, who has some more complex struggles in his life, in a lot of ways, but still is trying to be good, but can't fully, like fight against his very real issues that he sees outside of himself, sees within himself. So it makes Duke a lot more of a tragic figure, and I think it adds a little bit more extra dimension to the accounts that Ventress reads in Dooku Jedi Lost. So three great episodes all around.
Yeah, agree. I loved everything that had to do with Dooku in this show. The way all three build on each other is I think the perfect way to do a series like this. Obviously, we can do, if Dave Filoni just has a one episode story to tell here in the future and they just randomly throw it up, great, let's do it. But I really enjoyed this nice little 3 episode arc. Each episode too, they're calling these like short films, but they're this like 2 minutes, 3 minutes less than Clone Wars episodes. So they basically are like new episodes of the Clone Wars. They're all around like 16 to 20 minutes. It's great that they didn't contradict Dooku Jedi Lost. A little sad with the third one. There's a little bit of a contradiction with like a Darth Plagueis book, or a little bit of an acceleration with that. So if we're gonna adapt that book eventually here, they might need to change a few things. It's interesting how quickly Dooku is involved with Sidious right after the Phantom Menace. Basically, being we get to see him crowned apprentice in this episode to Sidious, and Yaddle's his last test. Can he give up his past more fully? I feel like Sifo-Dyas would be more of a test because based on Dooku's Jedi Lost, that's like his best friend. But regardless of all that, I really appreciated everything that went before with Dooku. I love seeing Mace get promoted to the Jedi Council. That was a really nice touch. And the Raxus stuff was really great for Dooku's character because of the whole separatist connections. All of it just felt really thoughtful, and the stories weren't just little stories that had big importance. They were typical Clone Wars stuff where every piece of it is drenched in Star Wars lore to where everything is so thoughtfully connected to all of the other stuff that's a part of this universe and really is looking to push the characters forward rather than just existing in the characters' lives. I really dug that, and especially tiptoeing through Dooku Jedi Lost with it being so all encompassing. It's a great audiobook and it is really, really good, but it does cover so much of Dooku's life in such a sparse detail that like there's fine lines that you can't touch if you're doing more Dooku stories without stepping on it, but it's hard to talk about the most important details of Dooku's life without stepping on it. So there's a really fine line there, and they did a great job. I really enjoyed all of Dooku's stuff. So the other 3 episodes all revolve around Ahsoka, as we usually get with Dave Filoni. We got to see the first one at Star Wars Celebration, but we had 2 more episodes that were fresh to us for the first time. Sanak, what were your thoughts on the Ahsoka arc or episodes in this show?
Yeah, it's hard to call it an arc because it seems like this is more of a these three episodes of Ahsoka was just to showcase like some parts of the chronology of Ahsoka that he'd probably known for years, Filoni had known for years, but didn't actually have time to fit into the Clone Wars as a flashback or as a continuation. Um, but I'd say I'm a little conflicted. I'm not in the sense that I didn't like the episodes. I still, compared to a lot of people from what I've read, I really liked the first episode. I think a big thing for me was that Ahsoka's like name is derived from like Indian mythology and rulers and all that. So it was fascinating for me, especially as an Indian person, to see over the years her character kind of take on more like the South Asian, not Southeast Asian, a little bit more African cultures and get that all blended into her character and kind of start losing everything that was initially there that felt very Indian for me. But then that first episode just throws you right back. Like the names are like basically ripped off from like Indian gods and all that. So that was very cool. The second episode was fun because it feels very classically Clone Wars, except instead of being built up to have like a resolution in like 2 or 3 episodes, this is over the span of the war. The only thing I dislike is a small critique of like this is, I guess, at least several months when we first start the second episode with Ahsoka and Anakin's apprenticeship. But Obi-Wan has his Clone Wars, not Clone Wars, he has his Attack of the Clones hair. So I can say like maybe he grew it out, but like it feels like Filoni's also retconning parts of like his own stuff too, which is like, why would you do that? But I like that story because it ties Jesse in from the very ending of the season 7 Siege of Mandalore arc to the very beginning of her training on how to take down so many different enemies. It makes us like, I guess, like it evokes, I guess the word is the word I'm looking for, evokes like those memories that we have of like, oh, remember when Ahsoka looked like this? Okay, here's a transition point. Oh, remember when she like changed to her one later in the war and Anakin's hair was longer? Like, okay, that's cool. Oh, remember in 2020 when we finally got to see Siege of Mandalore after so many Clone Wars is back campaigns, and oh look, it literally ends. The final shot is literally just from behind the back of the hangar scene, and now we have like a little bit more context for why she was so prepared. She was so able to handle herself. The third episode is the one where I'm a little bit more iffy on because, as we already know, the Ahsoka novel seems to have been completely decanonized to some degree by Siege of Mandalore, especially because everything with the siege is wrong. Her lightsabers are green in the book, Anakin turns them blue. So those things were kind of going away, but the story for the most part takes place after the siege, and I thought that would remain pretty intact or at least retold. Here, she's pretty early on engaging with Bail Organa, who seems like very actively working to set up this full fulcrum system with her. Um, Her interaction to just easily kind of show that she has the force was like a little like, really like just like the weeks after Order 66, just holding out your hand for a little too long. Like, you can be a little bit more subtle. You're not like someone who has to strain to use the force. And then the Inquisitor, who I'm not sure if they are the Sixth Inquisitor. They're defeated, but then I don't know if they're a Sokon species that has like a gaseous form, kind of, because the mass deflates. So maybe it is still the Sixth Inquisitor. We just see that in a different encounter. It's not the same people that Ahsoka was with that she was protecting in the novel. It's a hard one because I'm not really sure to what it means. Like I think the biggest takeaway is that she's almost immediately starts working as Fulcrum to work against the Empire and its fledgling development. And I'm glad that wasn't like added into the Bad Batch. It lets the Bad Batch kind of stay focused on its own characters and not be overshadowed. But I'm very unsure of that third episode. Why? Like what was there for that story that needed to be done that not only riff too much on what we already have in the Ahsoka novel, but almost seems like it's replacing it, and it's all very unclear.
Yeah, the Ahsoka episodes, if I remember right, during Celebration, Filoni was pretty clear. Oh, these are just ideas that I came up with about Ahsoka versus Dooku. He actually sat down and wrote all three of them together, and I've enjoyed each one. But I think also, well, starting with the Ahsoka as a child episode, which you would think is the first, if they're starting with that one, you would think is the oldest, but it's definitely not older than really any of the episodes with Dooku. Maybe it's like right around the Phantom Menace. You start with that one, which I think is a nice little small package. That's more in the vein of like what a short film would be, or like one of the Rebels shorts, but 20 minutes instead of five, something like that. And then you jump to the second episode, which is again a nice little bonding moment for Anakin and Ahsoka, adds more to their relationship as if we needed more added, and then a nice bonding with her and Rex and the clones. And it's kind of reminiscent of a lot of stuff we've seen in Clone Wars, but it doesn't really do anything unique or interesting. It just kind of gives a little bit of insight on why Ahsoka is able to easily fight clones, or when she gets surrounded on the bridge of the Star Destroyer or Republic cruiser, then she is able to fight off the clones for 5 seconds and then escape. It's kind of like the only insight it gives us, but I don't think anybody was really going like, oh, we need to know why Ahsoka is able to fight clones. Third one, I agree in terms of like why they needed to tell that specific story if it is going to contradict the Ahsoka novel. Even though it doesn't like do what the Kanan thing in Bad Batch is, which is take a literal scene from the book and then do it again, but differently. And like not slightly differently or different perspective, like completely change it. It doesn't do that. So, for headcanon, you can still find ways to make it work. It doesn't completely negate the novel, but it is an interesting choice to go that route and have any implications on it, especially for a short. Like for a short that doesn't really tell us anything about Ahsoka, doesn't really do anything new for Ahsoka. We already know she gets involved with the rebellion from the Ahsoka book, from Rebels. There's nothing really there that's completely unique or different than anything. Love the Inquisitor design though. I think it's really great. And I like how she takes him down in like 5 seconds. It's just like all this build up to a really cool Inquisitor, and he even knows who she is. And then she just whoops him immediately. Also, I kind of felt like it was like kind of quick and easy to just randomly call Bail Organa for this random group of people that she doesn't know very well. At least they kept the thing that she's going by the name Ashla, which I guess is, something consistent with the book. Like in my head, I'm also trying to justify it to where in the book she's jumping around planets at the beginning. She's been to multiple different ones. It starts on off with her on a planet that she says she's only been for about a year, and she's gotten too close to the people there and she's made that mistake, so now she needs to move to a different planet. And so it gives this little history of her having already jumped from planet to planet. So maybe this is one of the early planets she wants to get involved with Bale, but she doesn't for a while until we redo kind of a similar arc that she's already gone through now. I don't There's ways I can make it work, but I also feel like that 3rd episode, it's an unnecessary reason to contradict canon, especially when it doesn't really give us like a crazy like, "Oh, yes, this is like the Ahsoka defining episode of her
Right,
path
right.
between
Yeah.
3 and 4."
To add to that, E.K. Johnston has been tweeting that like there's nothing that contradicts her book, which is curious to me. I don't know if there's this Inquisitor like survives and then is the sixth Inquisitor in the book when she eventually takes the lightsaber and purifies from. You could have taken one of these episodes and done something else different with it, and I think the whole product would have been much stronger. Even if these Ahsoka shows don't have to have the same impact as the Dooku episodes.
Right. It almost felt like a vehicle to just revisit early Clone Wars in some of these, like especially the 2nd episode, to revamp the entire style of the way those first 2 seasons looked, and it's honestly almost unrecognizable when you see what is in this episode. So I think the way we're going to do this is we usually give a score for a season of a show. We've done that for Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan. But since this show has 2 completely distinctly different types, or pieces of content within it, we're going to give our overall score and review for each of them, and then I guess kind of a cumulative one that it would add up to. So, Senek, what were your scores for the Dooku and the Ahsoka episodes?
Yeah, I'd say it's obvious from this review that we clearly value the Dooku episodes. Like that is the meaty substance that we're looking for here. I would give the Dooku episodes a 4 because as much as I enjoyed them, I think perhaps that first episode we could have spent a little bit more time on the Qui-Gon dynamic, and on the second episode, Mace Windu is kind of just there. Those were like my small critiques because I thought it flowed really well. Otherwise, I just think it could have been tightened up and strengthened a little bit more. The Ahsoka ones, I'm a little bit more on. I'd give it a 3 only because I really liked the first one. And the second one is like a trip down memory lane from just even 2 years ago. Like 2020 seems so long ago, but like we waited 10 something years essentially for those episodes of Siege of Mandalore, and to see a little bit more of that was unnecessary, but it was still nice to see. But then that third episode is just I don't know, like it's so insignificant enough for me to just kind of block out, but I don't think it's executed well. It feels like a very simplified. outline for what is actually in the Ahsoka novel. It doesn't necessarily cancel out that book and overwrite what happened there, but I'm not really sure where it fits either. It's very vague for me. Cumulatively, I guess I'd have to give the show a 3.5, split the difference there. If we had even more Dooku stuff, or if we had someone other than the Ahsoka in this supposedly first season of Tales, I think this show could have been like something I'd look forward to anytime Filoni's like, I'm free to do more episodes and explore new Jedis and eras, and I would be super hyped for it.
I'm on the similar track with you for both. I loved the Dooku stuff. I thought it was fantastic, especially for being short little vignettes of his life. I think it touches on a lot of the best moments that weren't already touched on. I like that it does pay mostly respect to Dooku Jedi Lost. First episode was probably my second favorite one. Second one was probably my least favorite of the three Dookus, and then the last one was the Sith Lord is the best episode of this whole show. With Liam Neeson coming back too, is hoping for some actual scenes, and there's not too much, but I guess we get to see kind of the sad last farewell, the very uneventful final farewell between the two of them. I love also. I meant to say this earlier. I love the line that Dooku gives Qui Gon at the end of the first episode about being a far greater Jedi than he is. Qui Gon gives that same line to Obi Wan and Phantom Menace. Love that. Just love all the way they were able to tie so much together. I'm gonna go 4.25 for Dooku, and then Ahsoka. Similar to Dooku, I like the way the vignettes are done. I enjoy each moment in her life, even if the story doesn't feel as impactful or as necessary, especially the way they set up the season. If you're watching it chronologically by episode, you start with the Ahsoka episode, and then you kind of forget about that one because you get locked in the 3 straight episodes of Dooku, and then you have two kind of smaller vignettes of Ahsoka. But that falls a little victim to the order of release because if you're just watching it consecutively, the Ahsoka ones definitely feel like an afterthought compared to the other ones. But I still had a good time enough with the first, and the third one is a good episode. If we're canon people, so it bothers us, but for most people, they're just going to enjoy it. So I'm going to give the Ahsoka ones 3.5. I enjoyed them, but could be better. Overall, I'd give the show probably a 4. I know that's not quite in between the two, but I'd probably give this a 4. I want to see more from this, and I like having this little outlet for Dave Filoni to tell Clone Wars stories here for the rest of time. Let's just let him keep coming back. So those are our thoughts on Tales of the Jedi. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, check out all the other content we've posted this week. We've posted the Star Wars Labs Holiday Special #2, Terrifying Tales of the Sith. If you want to check that out, it's with me and Kylo Ren. We also posted a review of Andor Episode 8. And then tomorrow we'll have predictions and speculations for Andor Episode 9. Then on Halloween, on Monday, we will be having our review of Death Troopers for this month's Legends Book Club. So if you've read that book or haven't read that book and want to hear our thoughts on it, check out our video on Monday. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.